Welcome to this special live taping. The Gaslit Nation Salon welcomes two senior campaign advisors for Judge Susan Crawford's extraordinary campaign. They helped defeat Elon Musk in the pivotal Wisconsin Supreme Court race. We're joined by Patrick Guarasci, the campaign's chief political strategist, and Sam Roecker, head of communications. And so this was a massive win in Wisconsin. My mother called me the night it was announced that you not only won, but won by a massive margin. And my mother was like singing on the phone to me, like just pure joy. And I think that's how the country felt and much of the world. What were the stakes in this election?
When you're walking down the street, this rarely happens in my career, and someone I know stops me and says, "I heard you're working on that race. It's really important to me. Don't lose that one." You felt the pressure of that race. I don't know about you, Sam.
No, you absolutely do. I mean, it's all you can think about, right? And it's such a compressed timeline too, going from November to then an election in April that's statewide, and the stakes are so high. You feel like everything is kind of on you to prove that, progressive Democrats can still win these tough races.
And it's like, just to jump in here, I calmed myself thinking about this, maybe others did too, thinking about two things always. One, Susan Crawford never doubted that she was going to win. If she was on this call with you or on this Zoom or on this recording, she would tell you that. She had this sense that she was going to do this. And we had a great team. And that team was led by Cassie Finelli, who's one of the best campaign managers in the country. And anytime I got nervous, I just reminded myself, we have a great candidate who really believes, and we have a great team that's being run by a great person. And we just need to do our jobs and we'll get this done.
Where do you think Judge Crawford's invincibility, steel level of confidence came from, especially when she was up against literally all the money in the world via Elon Musk?
What do you think, Sam? I'm intrigued.
I mean, that's just who she is. I mean, she knew why she was in this race, right? This was not something that she decided on a whim. Hey, I'm going to put my name on the ballot. She knew from the beginning what the stakes of this were, why it was important. She also has a background as somebody who has been a prosecutor, who's worked at major state government agencies. She's been a judge. She's been through this, and she has the experience. So I think it really came just from a place of confidence and knowing that she built the best possible team you could around her. And that at the end of the day, it was her job to go out there, talk to folks about why she was running, and trust the people that she put around her.
Yeah, I've never really been around someone like this before. Maybe like a great athlete, or very rarely a candidate that really just has this super belief in themselves. And she was absolutely, in hindsight, she was absolutely the right person for this campaign. You always wonder at the beginning, like, is there anyone else out there? It was so perfect that she ran, because she herself had this belief that allowed her to withstand all of these major things that were being thrown at her, these curveballs left and right.
What were some of those curveballs? Like Elon Musk, we saw a video of him up on a stage wearing a iconic Wisconsin cheese hat. There were these giant "The Price is Right" Bob Barker like checks that he was giving out to people. What were some of the things that Elon Musk threw at you? And did your research show that maybe some of them were borderline illegal?
Well, I'll start, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, Sam, because you're getting two sides of the campaign here, which is really, I think, is interesting. We haven't done one of these sessions together. I think the biggest concern beyond the cheese hat and the Price is Right checks and was the over $25 million that he spent on the race. He's the largest donor to a Supreme Court race in the history of the United States, from what we could tell. And, you never expect that. You could plan for it, but we were always wondering, like, is this money being spent wisely? Is he being able to achieve what he's saying publicly that he's going to achieve? And so we planned for his game plan to work. And we planned to try to win in that very, very difficult environment. We had hoped to win by 10 points or more, but we did not expect that. And so we planned to win in a very tough environment. And I think that helped us prepare. But Sam, jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, to the question of, was it borderline illegal? I think there was definitely things that he did during this race that broke the law. So we'll see what happens with those. But it's so hard to track. Are people signing up for their $100 checks to go vote. I mean, I haven't heard of anybody who's received a check yet, so people might be waiting on those. But we saw a lot of things that were also just hard to track. He had an offshoot of one of his groups called Progress 2028 that did these very scammy, misleading texts and ads. We still don't know how much was spent on that. He never disclosed that. They never registered with the state. So there was so much of that was just unknown going into election day of, did he spend, $5 million extra on something else that we just never registered?
For the stuff that's borderline illegal, are there any investigations ongoing? Is he going to face any consequences for that, or is he just going to move on to the next big election?
Yeah, I mean, there were complaints with the ethics commission in the state during that, and that can be a long process. So hopefully something comes of those down the road, but it's still too early to tell.
So Linda dropped a question in the chat. Did Sam and Patrick figure out effective ways to deal with the lies?
Well, I think one thing is we didn't build our campaign around Elon Musk. I'm teased, by the way, on how I say his name. So I guess I say his name funny. I should say Elon. I call him Elon. So I hope that doesn't bother you, Elon Musk. But I was teased mercilessly after the campaign for mispronouncing his name. But back to the point, we built a campaign around Susan and around some of the key issues that we knew were going to really sing to the electorate and that the electorate really cared about. Public safety, abortion, some of these other crime, corruption, extremism. We've tried to stay focused there on that because we knew if we did that we would really connect with the voters because that's what the voters cared about. When Musk is kind of coming in, like spreading these lies and trying to undermine Susan with the voters, like we had already built that relationship with the voters by the time he showed up. I don't know what you think, Sam, but
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is, how do it would have been easy for us to get distracted, right? And just focus on Elon the entire time, during the final stretch. But we'd laid this foundation that Brad Shiml was a corrupt politician. And it really is, with the checks, like that, all that tied back to this idea that he's trying to buy it. He wants Brad Shiml on the court because he knows Brad Shiml is as corrupt as they come. So we really used Elon and the checks and all those stunts as a way to kind of reinforce this corruption angle too. Instead of just getting sidetracked and talking about Musk, it was really he's doing this stuff, but here's why Brad Shiml.
Didn't Elon Musk, or doesn't he face some sort of investigation or oversight already? Didn't he have some business interest in why he needed to buy the Supreme Court race?
Yeah, this was, I think, 5 or 6 days before he started spending money. His Tesla had filed a lawsuit against the state of Wisconsin. A case that's very likely to come to the Supreme Court at some point. And so you can put two and two together. Voters are smart, right? If they file a suit and then a few days later he starts tweeting about this race, eventually starts spending money, it's pretty clear that he's done in this just out of the kindness of his own heart.
So question in the chat from Stacy. Do Sam or Patrick have any stories about anyone they talked with who switched their plan to vote from Republican to Democrat and why? Or was the get out the vote campaign strong, or both?
Sam, do you have any fun stories from the trail?
I mean, the thing I heard most were people who may have otherwise not voted, right? This was, may have kind of been under the radar. The attention that Musk pouring $25 million in, everybody knew that there was an election happening. This wasn't a question about, what's happening on April 1st. People knew it was coming. So I think more than anything were those low propensity voters who, knew that this was coming up and made sure that they turned out.
Yeah, I mean, the turnout was massive for both sides. I don't know if you've seen this, but like Susan Crawford's vote totals would have beaten Scott Walker or would have beaten previous people who've run statewide successfully. That just shows like the amount of people that really started to pay close attention to this race out here. And we were, the past election that we had worked on, Sam and I together, was the Janet Protasiewicz race, where about 1.85 million voters voted. We knew that the voting was likely going to go up and over that. And so once you start getting into well over 2 million votes in Wisconsin, you start kind of wondering, who are these people? And they don't normally vote in spring elections. How are they going to vote? And so Sam is right. Some of this stuff really turned off those voters in Wisconsin.
So he was like throwing money at them and it just didn't work.
No, I think it's abhorrent. It's just like one of those things where what's the best compliment you can get from someone in Wisconsin? I'm originally from New York. I moved out here in the early 2000s. I think the best compliment you can get is that you're a hard worker. And it's kind of it's a state where people believe that their elected officials should work for them, not for someone who's paying them money. I mean, it's like the idea you would go to someone in Green Bay and give them a check and say, vote against your own interests because I'm giving you $100. That's just not Wisconsin.
It's literally what Russian-backed candidates tried in Moldova, and they were like handing out money to voters, and it failed.
Wow.
So I wanted to ask you about Scott Walker. Ari Berman of Mother Jones wrote an incredible book on the tyranny of the minority, looking at Wisconsin in particular being a laboratory of autocracy, where the Koch brothers political network poured so much dark money into Wisconsin. Scott Walker went to war against unions, workers, the working class. And over time, Wisconsin has been clawing its way back from the brink. You guys could have easily gone the way of Ohio and Missouri and didn't. What saved you?
I have thoughts, Sam, but you go ahead.
No, I mean, I think one, it just shows that Wisconsinites in general, they don't want either extreme, right? They're more middle of the road. They want people who are hardworking, who are common sense. They don't want somebody who's necessarily out there to burn everything down like Scott Walker did during his time as governor. So I think that's part of it, is just how do you balance out that extremism? Um, the other thing is, I mean, we have a really strong progressive network in Wisconsin now. We have a strong state party who has had year-round organizing now, I think since 2018.
Thanks to
So it's
Ben
really those,
Wickler.
yeah,
Well
absolutely.
done.
So I mean, that's been a huge part of it too. Is just we have all these groups who are doing this work every day, whether there's an election or not, to make sure that infrastructure is there to turn on when we need it in fights like this.
Yeah, I think also like what we have experienced this extremism for so long out here in Wisconsin that people know it doesn't work. That you're really just you're pitting neighbor against neighbor instead of addressing the problem that needs to be addressed. If you don't have a policy prescription to address that problem and you distract people with these things that pit people together, eventually people realize, wait a minute, the problem is still existing. And I think that one of the reasons why we've done well out here, and Sam has really hit the nail on the head, we've got a great progressive infrastructure. Not only the party, but many of the independent groups are really first rate out here. But they continue to run these candidates that are far out there, really to the extremes. And in this case, Brad Shiml's whole campaign was predicated on the idea that he should court the extremes because that's how he was going to win. Instead of saying, you know what I'm going to do after watching Dan Kelly lose to Janet Protasewicz by 11 points, I'm going to go to the center and I'm going to try to like stake out some middle ground and duke it out there. They just tried to win a race in a way that the voters of Wisconsin are not normally going to reward you.
And so, what lessons can we take from this heading into the midterms and 2028 to beat MAGA?
Sam, what do you think?
I mean, I think number one, you just have to be relentless at this, right? We can't let anything get a free pass. It's about the hand-to-hand combat every day, making sure people know what's at stake, making sure we're holding people accountable. I think that's the biggest thing, is that you just have to be prepared for these fights, and you have to stick to a message and be relentless every day.
I think it's also that, after the last several months, we've seen a lot of hand wringing. What is the message? How are we going to connect with voters? Oh no, we can't ever talk to anybody ever again. I'm really trying to ham it up here, but you get what I'm saying. A lot of hand wringing. I think at some point after the November elections, we had some early meetings where we were refining our strategy, and we just said out loud, wait a minute. It's not that deep. We know how to connect with voters. We know what these voters care about. Our values resonate with them. Let's do that. Let's play that hand. And so one thing I would say to people is like, get out of your heads, recruit a great candidate, build a strong campaign, as Sam just said. Don't let them run over you. Stand up to them. Like, we didn't go looking to fight the richest man in the world, but we didn't back down from that fight.
That's great. And Congress now, one of the many horror stories coming out of Congress now is that they're considering the SAVE Act, which just passed the House and it will be going to the Senate. And that would basically require a proof of citizenship for federal elections. And I think there's concern that with Doge and Trump's disastrous tariff war, that unless the White House really backs down from all these protests and the elections like yours, if they just keep going, steamrolling, and just destroying America's standing in the world, our quality of life, and so on, that they may be doing this because they know that they have the voter suppression tools to essentially steal the midterms or stay in power in the midterms, steal 2028, so it's Trump coming in again or Vance. What would you say to folks, because you're on the state level and elections are determined on the state level as much as the federal government wants to come in and try to force things? What would you say to folks who are concerned that we may not even have free and fair elections going into the midterms, going into 2028, given the way things are going?
I would say, and then I'm going to hand it to you, Sam. I would say part of that strategy is to make you think that your participation doesn't matter. And you cannot sit it out. You must fight. And you must fight now, well into the election, so that you know that your vote is being counted and that you know that your voice will be heard. You cannot let anyone, I mean, we all came here from different shores for a better world. And we all left, very likely, governments that were not run in the way that we would like them to be run. I'll just speak for my own family. I came from Sicily 100 years ago, and I thought about them a lot in this election and how they had given up everything to come here for a better world. And then we were not going to allow this country to devolve into something that they would have left. And this is our country. We're going to fight for that dream always. And so you have to have that spirit in you as you go forth and fight. Sam, please take it from me before I continue to pay my attention.
Yeah, I mean, this has shown that people will stand up for their rights. I think people when their rights are threatened, whether it's reproductive rights, voting rights, they speak up and they fight back. We've seen that in Wisconsin. I think people just have to be prepared for that going forward.
Yeah, and I want to say many Americans came here. They descended from people who were originally here, Native
Yes, of course.
Americans, and then of
Yes.
course the slave
Yes.
trade. But yes, I get your point. As a fan, as obviously because my grandparents got the hell out of the Soviet Union. So yeah. And my mother, as a 5-year-old refugee from a World War II refugee camp, she was always told on the ship coming over to New York Harbor to see the Statue of Liberty that she's coming to America, a land of gold. She expected it to be literally made of gold. So yeah, I mean, exactly right. Like this is our country no matter what, and they can go. They can go to Russia. And so I wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for Americans now, especially in so-called red states, Republican hostage states, voter suppressed states? What should they be doing now, especially when they feel overwhelmed and they're up against Elon Musk and MAGA backed forces? What advice do you have for them listening?
Yeah, I would say just get engaged. If you're somebody who has thought about running for office, do it. Find a race that you want to run for and pull the trigger. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I know it can feel like a lot, especially in red states, but having good candidates at all levels of the ballot, especially local races too, where a lot of these candidates start out, making sure we're supporting local candidates, making sure we're investing in the infrastructure and training the future, whether it's volunteers or candidates.
And I think that a lot of those red states, you take a step back. You know your neighbors. You know who's in those states. Many of those folks share your values, and their states have been hijacked, as you referenced earlier, by a minority of people who are not representing the people of those states. And I have worked, I think Sam has too, in states that were once considered deeply red that are now purple. You just have to know that your values and what you stand for is very likely what your neighbor stands for. And your government is not representing you in that state. And it's, as Sam noted, find the ways to move forward and move. Do it.
That's great. Thank you both so much. So Linda writes in the chat, have you found a way to get people to stop watching Fox News assertions and investigate other info? I have Fox watching relatives in Wisconsin.
So I'll start, Sam. By the time you get into a quick election like this, you have to meet the voters where they are, not where you want them to be. So we actually advertised on Fox News. We fought on what you might consider to be red turf. We wanted to fight for every voter wherever they were. We were not going to cede any turf to Brad Shiml or Elon Musk or anyone. And so if you were listening to the radio, conservative radio, if you were listening to Fox News, you heard our message. And I think part of that is having a fearlessness to go after those voters who may be hijacked by some misinformation and try to fight for them. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, you have to meet people where they are. As much as we hate sending money to Fox News for ad, there are messages that do resonate. Like we saw in this race, and even Justice Prosewitz's race too. That if you're an independent or even a conservative, you also hate corruption in government. You also value a court that's independent. And so it's about finding those messages that work and can break through whatever else they're saying.
Robin writes in the chat, what about securing the vote? I am worried they're going to fuck with our voting system. Is anybody working on that?
Well, there are many people working on that. As you noted, many of those folks are based within those states, legal entities. In Wisconsin, we have a great nonprofit legal entity called Law Forward that has really taken on a lot of these fights to make sure that democracy is preserved. And who would have ever thought that we would be here in this moment? Maybe many of you are smarter and predicted this earlier. But I'd never thought that when I was a kid growing up that we would be fighting for democracy and people's votes to be counted, writ large. I'm stunned. This is where we're here, but this is where we are. It's not this is where we're here. This is where we are. Sam?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. There are groups out there who are working on this. I think also that our state party, a lot of state parties have strong voter protection arms too, who are, in these fights, making sure that that every vote is counted on election day. And I think, a lot of this too, it's ahead of election day, pushing back on all the misinformation that's out there. We see in Wisconsin every election cycle, it's 2 weeks out, and some candidate, in this case it was Brad Shiml, starts talking about how Milwaukee's going to do these, dumps of ballots at midnight, and things are going to turn against them. So it's calling those out too, from the start, not letting them get that misinformation out there from the beginning.
Do you think under this new DNC leadership, which promises a 50-state strategy where they're going to invest and strengthen the state parties to basically recreate this Wisconsin model that you guys have benefited from, having a strong state party as you've had? Do you have faith that that's the direction that we're ultimately heading under this new DNC leadership?
I haven't followed the DNC very much. So we've been in the trenches just, fighting these fights. They did try to help towards the end of the race. And just knowing that, the Ben Wicklers of the world and the Ken Martins have put together juggernaut parties in their respected states. I would hope that we would see strong parties in each state. I think that you're in a good environment when you have a strong party, strong independent groups that want to work within the legal structure with the party. They're not at loggerhorns, and the candidate. Some of these states you've got, and you could see this in this race, you could see that Elon Musk was doing his own thing to some degree. He did invest some money in the party. When you kind of work haphazardly, you're not working very efficiently. And there are states that have strong parties, strong groups, and strong candidates, and they all appreciate each other and respect each other. That's a state that's going to win. Minnesota is like that, where Ken comes from. So if he's trying to make the rest of the country reflective of Wisconsin and Minnesota in terms of how they organize, yes, that will be good for all of us.
So Robin dropped a question in the chat. Us baby boomers put a ton of work into the political system. And did you, Robin? And Gen X, Gen Z millennials have overdrawn. Have we, Robin? Where are the youth? What are your thoughts on the youth participation and youth vote that you saw in this election?
I'm talking too much. Sam, you jump in.
No, it was incredible in Wisconsin. There's a group called the Wisco Project who does a ton of organizing on campus, really outside the box stuff to get folks engaged. But we need more of that. I mean, they've been doing this in Wisconsin now for multiple cycles. That's a model, I think, for other states across the country where you've got a large college population. You got to get them engaged and out. I will say, from the campaign team, we had a pretty big campaign team. It was full of people who this may have been their first or second job in politics, who did just incredible work under tough conditions in a short amount of time to get things organized. Most of them started in January, so that compressed timeline to run a campaign of this scale. And so there are a lot of people at the staff level too who are out there engaged in this.
Yeah, the group that Sam is referencing during the Janet Protasiewicz campaign, they too were very active, and they had a dancing Janet that they would bring to college campuses, like a woman who was very smart, very from what I understand, a great organizer. And she would dress up as Janet Protasiewicz and with the collar and everything. And I think they brought a dancing Susan back, but they have these amazing, don't count the youth out. They know what they're doing. They are fired up and ready to go. And so on this campaign, I think they would do some organizing strategies like call your boyfriend. They would get all of these students together, women together, and they would literally text their friends and the men in their lives and be like, this is an important election. Abortion is on the ballot. Our rights are on the ballot. pay attention. And so like they have this like really unique way of approaching each other. Some of their ads were unbelievable. One of their ads, I hope that I don't get in trouble. My mom better not be listening. One of their ads started off with "fuck you," silence. And you were like, what? That's what Brad Shiml is going to do. If you're on your mom and dad's healthcare at 26, you're getting to get kicked off. It's like the advertising was so unique and so strategic to grab your attention if you're just going through your life as a younger person. I really was inspired by some of the stuff that they did.
That's a relief to hear. So I want to just switch gears now and looking back, just because I'm curious, I'd like to have that feeling of being at a dinner party with you all and we're on our second bottle of wine. If you were to give us your what your assessment is of why Kamala Harris lost the 2024 election, what did you see from your vantage point as experts in these dark arts of winning elections?
Who starts first? I need two bottles of wine to get there. You want to try?
I mean, I think, I think the problem was that if she let herself be defined by the other side early on, I think that's something in this race. That's why we started early. We laid this foundation to define who Judge Crawford was, to define who Brad Shiml was. And I think, just based on the timeline of that race and when she became the nominee, that was kind of baked from the beginning. People on the other side already defined who she was before she got a chance to do that herself.
Well, I think it was a really tough race for her to win, just considering the economic headwinds or the perception of them would be very difficult for anyone to win. I think that, well, I think, President Biden did a number of things that were really important. The electorate, as he has said himself, did not know that he had done those things for them. Like they didn't know that the infrastructure in their town or their city was built by the Reinvestment Act and that people had gotten jobs because of that funding and little things like that really matter. He had perhaps thought, I've done these things for the American people, but the American people didn't feel them. So when it comes to like who's on your side and who's looking out for you, I think Trump was able to kind of drive a wedge using the economy or the perception of it. And I don't know if it's even that deep beyond it. I think that there were a lot of people that voted in that election because they thought Donald Trump was going to help them with their, pocketbooks and by putting a little bit more food on the table or giving them a little bit more of their paycheck to take home. And I think sadly, many of those people are in for a rude awakening right now as we're all living through him doing the exact opposite, literally telling people, I'm going to actually make it more expensive for you. You're just going to have to trust me that this is going to work out in a year or two. I mean, it's craziness.
Yeah, the golden age is coming. Unicorns for everyone.
Exactly. I would like my unicorn, please.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone thinking of running for office want to ask Patrick and Sam questions while they're here? Okay, I have one more question. So obviously we saw the horror story of what happened to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and his family with a far-right terrorist firebombing his house. That obviously sends a disturbing message, anti-Semitic message in this case, but it was broader political violence and it puts a chill across the land. And we have had listeners who want to run for office, who did run for office in these Republican hostage states, very red districts who've come across all sorts of intimidation. What advice do you have for folks who might be feeling that political violent threat?
Sam.
Yeah, that's tough. No, I mean, it's very real. I mean, we hear from candidates all the time who that's, the thing that's standing between them and saying yes or no to running. They're concerned about what the impact on them and their family will be. I mean, thankfully, we have not seen a lot of this actually come to fruition in Wisconsin. It's obviously threats all the time in these kind of races, but so far nobody has acted on those. But I think it's it's something that people have to consider, and they have to take that seriously and make sure that they're doing the basics to look out for them and their family and a race at every level.
And it's just like shocking to see the governor's home be firebombed. I mean, this is like Josh Shapiro is like a reasonable human being who's like trying to do the best for his state, very popular, and it's somewhat shocking to see it. And it also is shocking to not see it universally condemned. And for people, especially those who like fan the flames of extremism and grift off of that and make money, you would at least think that there would be some shame and that people would say, don't would condemn it. And it just, you just kind of wonder, where we are. If your house was on fire, your neighbor would come help put the fire out. That's America. I don't understand what is happening where the governor could have his house firebombed in this day and age. It's just very frightening. But I think we all have to recognize that we're in this together and we need to look out for each other. And that gets me through it.
All right, so Kent writes in the chat, is this the age of performative politics where actual substance is a drag? If you cannot distill your message to 3 words, at least one of them negative, can a politician win?
Well,
I think so. I mean, I think that having those 3 words or few words is helpful. At the end of the day, you need to say more than that, right? You need to be tying the rest of that back to what those core points are. So it's not. I don't think it's performative. I think it's showing the ways that you are common sense, or showing the ways that the other side is corrupt and extreme. It's layering all of that in, and I mean that's what we've seen in Wisconsin does really well. It's just tying back to that narrative every chance you get.
and I think for these big elections, people really do get to know the candidates. I mean, they're tuned in, they're watching. Susan, if you ever want to see this, she did a whole hour in front of the Milwaukee Press Club and the Rotary, where she was in front of a panel of reporters and they were asking her questions, and then the public could ask her questions. And the answers to those questions are incredibly substantive, to the point that, like, I think, her criticisms of Shiml and of this moment were derived from her legal perspective. I think you could see in that moment, this is a Supreme Court justice. This is a intelligent person who cares about me, who's going to go up there and do right by me. And so I think the substance is very important, because at some point the performance of things is takes a back seat to, like, who are these people? So I do think it's very important.
Sarah writes, what do you recommend as actions we can take, especially in light of the violation of the Supreme Court decision to bring back Abrego Garcia? It feels like we're screaming into a void.
I mean, this is like a absolute stare down between the federal courts and the president. And it's a stare down that, I'm not a legal expert, but it's clearly a stare down that Trump and those who believe in, like, the unitary executive theory, or these theories that the executive branch should have even more power than it has now, they clearly have been wanting this stare down. They want to strengthen the executive beyond where it is, and it's quite frightening. I'm not quite sure where it is going to go. I don't know, Sam. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean the one bright spot I think is that we've seen, I mean, the other side's attacked the Wisconsin Supreme Court now for since we took the majority, right, trying to erode confidence and trying to say that it's some liberal political arm. Voters aren't buying it. Voters still have a very high impression of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. They trust the justices who are there. People are not buying that. So I hope that speaks to a larger general public feeling that our courts are in a good spot and should be trusted.
I think that's a very, very smart. I hadn't thought about that, Sam. That's a very smart part. Forget about what I said. Listen to what Sam said.
No, both of you. That is what we need to hear. All right. Does anyone have? Okay, there's more questions. Let's see. Anything else? Am I missing anything? Oh, looking from Kathy. Looking back, sorry, Kathy. Looking back, are there particular tactics of this recent campaign you think were the most effective, least effective? What was most effective for you? Like one thing, and then what was one thing that was least effective, where you're like, oh, that didn't give us the return on investment that we thought it would?
But most effective, you've heard a lot about, people kind of get on TV or something and they talk about, like, commercials are terrible and they have a diminishing return, and they might in, like, a big time presidential election. But when nobody knows who the candidates are, you really have to, and you have the money to do it, you have to use all of the tools that you have in front of you. So we did spend a lot of money communicating on television and streaming and any screen, any radio, any way that you got information, we were there. And I think that's very important. You have to have a multidimensional media approach, and you can't just say, I'm going to do one version of that. I'm going to do all TV and no grassroots. No, you got to do a real surround sound approach to the electorate, because it's so fractured. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It's hard to say what the one specific thing was. I mean, I do think one of the things that we did really well in this race was just stay on offense, and that started early on. I mean, Shiml gave us just so much material to work with. There were all these stories about the quotes that he was saying, the past year year and a half while he was running, doubling down on these extreme positions, saying there was no constitutional right to abortion in Wisconsin, talking about begging right-wing donors on his knees so much that he has to go buy new knee pads to get them involved. And so it was just about staying on offense the entire time. I think out of all the campaigns that I've been on, this one felt like we were on offense mostly every day. There wasn't a week, especially in that final stretch, where we felt like we weren't, the ones driving the narrative of the campaign.
That's great. Did having Elon as a villain help voter engagement? We worked against an initiative in my state we called the Billionaire Initiative. Just the info that out-of-state rich guys were behind it swayed people. And that is a question in the chat. So I will find the person who dropped it. We're just getting a lot of action in this chat. Sorry. But you can go ahead and answer that. And if whoever asked that, go ahead and say your name again, because I think I lost you. But go ahead.
I think it's Becky Dries.
Yes, Becky. Thank you.
I mean, I think just the level, right? I mean, it's not the fact that Elon was a billionaire. It's the fact that he spent 25 million in this. Like one out of every $4 that was being spent in this race was one guy. I think that has more to do with it, right? I mean, I think that plus the fact that he has business in front of the court, it's just the self-interest, the corruption, and then just the overwhelming amount of money that he was putting into the race.
Yeah, but I think also, just like we had said earlier, Elon was a factor. I think if we ran the whole campaign about him, we probably would have lost. I think we had to really establish who Susan was, why she was someone you should vote for, and then what the other issues were that are before the court that are really important to you. And I still think abortion is a huge issue. It's not just about the actual health services. It's about legal rights that you don't have, that you used to have, or you could potentially lose, and things that have been fought for generations. This is something like that really resonated with the electorate. And so I think Musk helped us in the end, although I would prefer that he didn't show up and take his $25 million somewhere else. But I think the other issues were really crucial as well.
Yeah, we all wish Musk would go away and use his billions to end world hunger, but the guy has some like unresolved childhood trauma and some like demon inside of him. So we have a question here from Lisa. I might have missed it, but how and when exactly is the issue of gerrymandering going to be addressed by the Wisconsin Supreme Court? And what are the districts that could be, sorry, my chat is blowing up. Sorry, I'll try again. I might have missed it, but how and when exactly is the issue of gerrymandering going to be addressed by the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and what are the districts that could be flipped?
So this is something that came up during the race. Actually, like Republicans seem to be like trying to make this an issue. There could be new congressional maps. Like there's no case in Wisconsin right now on this. There could be a case that could come before the court. But it was kind of like a talking point for the MAGA world that people had to come out and vote because people were going to steal congressional seats or something. Susan's never said a word about this and, has never weighed in on any of it at all, except to say that she's never said a word about it. It's possible that somebody could look at these maps and determine that they are gerrymandered and undemocratic and that they could make the case to the court system, but it's yet to be done. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that some of this on our side too came into effect because I think Brad Shiml would have found a way to go back and revisit the state legislative maps that were just found unconstitutional a couple of years ago. It's given our state legislature a path to having fair representation and some more common sense to it. So I think that was probably in the backs of some progressives' minds too, wanting to protect that progress that we've made in the past couple of years.
So I got a private message here in the chat from someone, so I won't name them, but they want to ask, what are your honest thoughts about Indivisible? Do those groups help you out?
Wow, Indivisible. You could see that Indivisible was quite organized in Wisconsin because they started doing huge visible shows of anger and disappointment in the decisions that Trump and his allies were making. And I think that was very important to kind of show people that it was okay to speak out. And they started to do a tremendous amount of organizing, so did the state party. But you could really see, I remember they had a rally in Milwaukee and a rally in Madison, and we were getting photos sent to us from the rally saying, you see this energy out here. It's quite impressive.
And then Linda writes, do you know how much money in total is spent on campaigns, including on messages of various sorts and so on? I think 404 Media said they only knew about the Progress 20.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to say. I mean, it was, over $100 million total. It's
Wow.
tough to break that down as far as what messages, had money behind them and what didn't. I mean, the Progress 2028 is a great example. We don't know where that money came from. They didn't register with the state. They didn't file anything. It's a group tied to Elon. They did a very similar tactic in the presidential election. And there's an ongoing complaint with that one. I know there was a group who filed a complaint saying, you're obviously trying to influence the election. Why aren't you registered and reporting this? So hopefully that goes somewhere.
So what is next for Wisconsin? Is Wisconsin going to be a solid blue state? Do you see like what trajectory is it on?
I think this is a purple state. I think this is still going to be a purple state. I think it really depends on how much turnout you get. We had well up and over 2 million folks that voted. As you get closer to 3 million, you get a little bit of a different shade of purple, but a very close state that deserves your time and attention. And then there's a huge amount of races coming up that are still pivotal. You know, big governor's race, big attorney general's race. We'll see if the governor's running for reelection. A big Supreme Court race next year that could move the balance from 4-3 progressive to 5-2 progressive. That's a huge step in the right direction. So lots going on here in Wisconsin that deserves your time and energy.
So Senator Ron Johnson is the absolute worst. He was very early MAGA. He is up for re-election in 2028. This is a question from Kent in the chat. Can Wisconsin finally get rid of Ron Johnson?
Looking at you.
Absolutely. No, I think so. I think that, especially with what we're seeing out of Congress right now, we're seeing just a ton of energy, especially on the congressional level. People are engaged. They are keeping an eye on what Congress is doing. And if we can tie that to Ron Johnson and have a good candidate who's ready to hold him accountable for that and present themselves, I think we can absolutely get rid of him.
And
Yay.
what a strange state in that you have Tammy Baldwin, who's like an incredibly competent U.S. senator who is like literally known for doing an amazing constituent services, really going wherever you need her to be. And then like a contrast, you've got Ron Johnson, who's this like firebrand MAGA trying to overturn free and fair elections by passing notes and when the certification of the ballots is going on. I mean, it's just like crazy out there guy, doesn't represent the state at all. And you would imagine that he could be very vulnerable in a couple of years.
Right. Like, who are these people in Wisconsin who are like, yes, sign me up for more Ron Johnson?
I don't know who those people are.
You got to
I
find them and
don't
talk to
know.
them down and down, beer, coffee, whatever they need.
For
Yeah.
certain.
I mean, he also he tied himself to Brad Shiml in the final days. He was doing a tour with them. It was bizarre to watch Shiml do interviews. Ron Johnson was basically acting as his press secretary and giving feedback to his answers and calling on reporters and criticizing their questions. Hopefully that's an indication that there was no coattails for Ron Johnson tying himself to Shiml in the last few days there.
So, final question, and then we'll let you guys go. And this has been super motivating and inspiring. And we're excited that we still have a chance at democracy in America,
Yeah.
according to you both. So, Robin writes in the chat, how do we apply purple state race tactics, which worked in Wisconsin, to Texas and other purple states? Do you guys talk to each other across party lines? Not across state lines, I should say.
We do. I mean, it depends on the operatives and we try to share information. Look, I think it's goes back to what we were just talking about. In Wisconsin or in Minnesota or Michigan or Pennsylvania, some of these, Georgia, you have really high functioning state parties. These are the key ingredients. A really well-run state party, really good candidates, and really very good outside groups that want to all work together as long as the law allows for it or within the law. And if they have mutual respect for each other and they work hard together, that is a recipe for success. If you get infighting or groups that are trying to siphon money away from another and really build their own fiefdoms, and it really hurts the effort behind the scenes. And we could name states that have suffered because of that.
New York.
I would say Florida is the top of the list to me, where you've seen some press that people have gone on the record and talking about how the friction between independent groups and the state party made things very difficult over the last decade in states like Florida. That's what I'm thinking about. And it's really on us as people behind the scenes to get together and respect each other and build that. That would give a Texas or a Florida or many other states a much better fighting chance. I don't know, Sam, what did I miss? Or
Yeah. No, you nailed it. I mean, obviously we all talk, but I think every election you should be looking at, what are the lessons learned, what worked, what didn't work, seeing how we can make these campaigns better.
I want to just throw in one final grandiose question because I get asked this. It's not enough for us to just, well, at this point, with our house on fire, we have to put out the fire, but we want to preserve and take back our democracy. But at the same time, we also want to have a clear vision of where everything is headed. So what you just listed, Patrick, was like perfect. You've got to have a strong state party. You've got to have this. You just gave us a full checklist, right? Like a doctor. In terms of that, though, what are we also building towards? Like, what do you see as your strong checklist of like, what's like the grander strategy of what you think America should look like?
Well, in this campaign, we were focused on making sure that if you had the misfortune of appearing in court, that you knew that your judge or your justice in this case was going to be fair and impartial. I think it starts there. We should know that our government works for us and is going to provide excellent service. And we should demand that from those that represent us. And it should be honest and open and transparent. And that's something that I've now realized that I'm going to dedicate most of my life to fighting for.
Thank you both so very much. Sam, do you have any other closing words?
No, I agree with what Patrick said on that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's about making sure that we've got a government that looks out for everyone, that gives everybody that opportunity to succeed and have their rights protected. And we've got to get good candidates out there to make that happen.
Well, thank you both. You always have a home here. Come back again. And we wish you lots of strength and resolve and excitement as you continue to chip away at these assholes and win. Thank you so much for all the important work that you're doing.
You. Thanks for everything you're doing. It was great.
Anytime. Come back again. Best of luck. Keep us posted on all your big, exciting achievements you have. We're your wind in your back, okay?
Thank you.
Appreciate it.